Can we begin the housekeeping comments, please?
Thank you for participating in today's meeting. If attending in person, please do not connect to Zoom or teleconference while in the room, and please silence all devices. If translation is provided, click on the globe at the bottom of your screen to select either English or Spanish. Public comment will be taken after each item. If you're in the auditorium and wish to comment, please use the iPads located in the lobby or complete a blue speaker card as available. If you need assistance, please find a South Coast AQMD employee. Speakers may be limited to a total of 3 minutes or less for all agenda items. Times may be shortened to ensure all speakers can be heard. A countdown timer will be displayed on the screen for each public comment. More time will be allotted for Spanish translation that is not simultaneous. For questions or issues on making a public comment, please call the public advisor at 909-396-2432. That's 909-396-2432. Please adhere to the speaker time limit and treat others with courtesy, civility, and respect. Failure to do so can result in your mic being muted or you being removed from the meeting. Be aware that this meeting is being recorded. By participating, you authorize recording of audio and visual content presented during the live event and consent to subsequent use of the recording in the public domain by South Coast AQMD.
All right, good morning. Welcome to Mobile Source, everyone. I'll call this meeting to order at 8:59. Do we have other board members that we know are ready? Don't see any there.
Chair, it's not an action item, so we can proceed just to allow the presenters to get going.
Okay, perfect. Let's do a roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem McAllen. Absent. Supervisor Mitchell. Absent. Supervisor Perez. Absent. Councilmember Rahman. Absent. Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez. Absent. And Chair Delgado.
And I'm here. And I'm guessing some board members will trickle in as we get started. And we have our first speaker. It looks like who's ready to go. So we'll keep going with informational item number 1.
Thank you, Chair. Just as a bit of background for the speakers that we have today, we're happy to have 3 outside experts this morning in the field of electrification. We've invited them here in response to committee members' requests in the past to hear directly from utilities with regards to their efforts to upgrade the grid to handle transportation electrification needs, in particular for goods movement. There are 2 main topics we have heard interest in hearing from these experts. First, as part of the adoption of our 2022 Air Quality Management Plan, we committed to continue working as a facilitator on zero emissions infrastructure across our region. This requires coordination with many stakeholders, including utilities. And second, we of course are actively engaged right now with the ports on a proposed cooperative agreement regarding plans for zero emissions infrastructure. So this morning, we're going to hear from 3 speakers. We'll first hear from Chanel Parson, the Director of Electrification, Customer Programs, Clean Energy and Demand Response for Southern California Edison. Then we'll hear from Jason Hills, the Director of Power Engineering for Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. They will speak to the actions their respective utilities are taking to upgrade the grid. Lastly, we'll hear from Jonathan Raspa, a Senior Regional Planner for Goods Movement for the Southern California Association of Governments. They've been working on a tool to assist in evaluating potential sites for zero-emission charging and fueling trucks. We will hear from all speakers in a single agenda item, which means we'll hear the 3 presentations in a row before we get to public comment. And all 3 speakers today will be presenting remotely. And so with that, I think we can turn to Chanel, who I see is on screen.
Good morning, and thank you for having me today. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Good morning.
Wonderful, thank you. So I want to start with talking about a little bit about who Southern California Edison is. Some of you may be very familiar, but Southern California Edison is one of the nation's largest electric utilities. You can go to the next slide, please. We are an electric-only utility. We've been around for almost 140 years. We serve 50,000 square miles in southern, central, and coastal California, and we have 15 million residents. Next slide, please. So we are an industry leader in the transition to clean energy. We have written multiple white papers across the years about how do we get to California's goals of being carbon neutral by 2045. And what we've identified is along the right-hand side of the slide, you'll see that we need 100% of decarbonized electric retail sales. We need to electrify 90% of light and medium duty vehicles, 95% of buildings, 48% of low carbon fuels for non-electric energy, and then we need to sink 75 million megatons of carbon. For the transportation, I did mention it's 90% of light and medium duty vehicles. What we have identified in our Countdown to 2045 white paper is that we need to electrify 54% of heavy duty vehicles and 80% of buses. So just to give you a sense of the thought for the larger side. So what we identified is in order to support all of that new electric load that we need to get to carbon neutrality by 2045, that we're going to need more solar, more wind, more storage to increase the generation, the clean generation that we have. And then we need to upgrade our transmission and distribution grid. And if we did it the way that we've always done it, it would be at an unprecedented scale and speed. So for example, we would need to upgrade our transmission system at 4 times the rate that we would historically upgrade our transmission system. And we would need to upgrade our distribution grid at 10 times the rate that we would need to do that. We definitely just collectively don't have the time or money to do it that way. And so we've actually been thinking and implementing outside of the box ideas that get us there much quicker and much cheaper than the way the grid's traditionally been upgraded. However, bottom line is we find that electrification is the most feasible and cost-effective way to meet our state goals. So I'll move to the next slide. Here is just a little bit of a depiction of some of the thought leadership that we've put out there. And as I mentioned, we have a role to manage our grid. And the traditional grid is what we've been managing for decades and decades and over a century. And we are making sure we want to deliver safe, reliable, and affordable power. Today's grid, however, we are wanting to make it more of a bidirectional grid and in a way that's going to support more reliability, resilience, and how do we integrate customer DERs. And that's going to be key as one of those ways that we are mitigating the need to build up the grid 4 to 10 times the speed that we typically do is how we work with customer DERs to do grid optimization. We do have a white paper out there as well about the reimagined grid that would enable our pathway to 2045. So we do have a few white papers out there if you're interested in taking a look. Next slide, please. So I'll start by talking a little bit more big picture about the grid, and then I will dig in a little bit deeper to, what are we doing to actually electrify sites, specific customer sites, and how we work with our customers. So we are making proactive grid investments to support a high electrification future. So what does this mean? We did a bottoms-up analysis, a TE grid readiness analysis, and this is beyond our 10-year annual planning that we normally do. And we looked at where is the electrification going to occur. And we identified that, the really concentrated areas of heavy electrification, specifically for medium duty and heavy duty, will be freight corridors, truck stops, warehouses, and ports. The medium duty, heavy duty is a specific call out because medium duty, heavy duty infrastructure almost always needs a lot more power at a concentrated location than light duty does. And so it's usually the medium duty and heavy duty where there may be a trigger for grid upgrades in order to meet the load. And so the key here is we want to be able to adequately forecast where and when that load is going to occur, and then make proactive grid investments. I have a slide later that shows how long some grid investments may take, but depending on what the upgrade that is needed, it may take a year or two or 5 years, 10 years plus, depending on what's needed. And so if we know the load is going to manifest, we want to start making these upgrades before we have a capacity deficit so that our customers aren't having to wait a significant period of time to have their projects ready to go. I'll also talk about some other things we're doing alongside of the grid upgrades that will help our customers. But just to wrap up this slide, we see that more than 90% of the locations that are really targeted for electrification in the future are along major transportation corridors or have proximity to ports. And then 70% of those are in disadvantaged communities. We have an initiative called Ready Grid, which does enable earlier interconnection before the grid upgrades are made. And then we also have an effort where we allow our customers to use a load control management system, which is effectively software and hardware that allows our customers to interconnect at maybe a lower load than they ultimately want while we're preparing the grid to serve the full load that they need. Next slide, please. So this is the slide that I was mentioning. Grid upgrades to enable capacity can be time intensive. And so in addition to proactive build, which I mentioned on the prior slide, we are also using bridge solutions to support our customers. So if the capacity that's needed triggers a small grid upgrade project, maybe we need to modify an existing distribution circuit. This is something that might take 6 months to 2 years. Mid-sized projects where if we need to create a new distribution circuit or modify a substation can take 2 to 3 years. Larger projects, if we need a new large 33 kV substation or a large sub-transmission line reconductor can take 5 or more years. And then if we need to build a new substation or a new sub-trans line or trans line, these projects can take 7 to 10 years. I will note the time that this takes is not only the time it takes for the utility to do the construction. A lot of the time here is awaiting licensing, permits, land rights, easements, effectively getting the approval to do the work, getting the equipment, and then executing the work. And so we have been advocating as a company for some time and continue to advocate on how we can make the approval processes more streamlined for licensing, siting, permitting, so that we can get these projects done much quicker. Next slide, please. So we do have a specific team that we created at Southern California Edison that we have called the Ready Grid team. And this team works with customers to implement bridging solutions so that they can energize their projects faster if there is a capacity deficit. One of the things that we need to do, apologies, my coworker has decided to join me. One of the things that we need to do is we need to focus on interconnecting new load as expeditiously as possible. So we need to obtain early insights on future interconnection requests. And early insights basically comes down to our customers engaging with us early and often on their plans. So if we know very early on how much load our customer needs, where they plan to site their project, we can come up with a lot of options and opportunities, a lot more on how we can serve them and serve them quickly. A big example that comes to mind is If a customer has a couple of locations where they can site their project, we would love to have that conversation with them before they sign a lease agreement or before they purchase the land. Because we might be able to say, well, hey, if you go with option A, we can serve this load right away. There's no grid upgrades needed. But if you go with option B, it might take a couple years, and here's what we can do within that time to help get you up faster. And if you go with option C, maybe that one triggers a new substation, and that's a really long lead time. So we want to work with our customers as partners to help them and support their needs, and early is better. We also are identifying opportunities internally to support process improvements and cycle times for customer interconnection requests. And that's really just streamlining our processes and making it simpler for customers. And then we have a number of solutions that we work with our customers on. So the flexible interconnection, which is the load control management system that I mentioned on a prior slide. We also are looking at mobile substations and mobile batteries, working with our customers on microgrids and other solutions that will help them energize their projects much sooner. Next slide, please. So getting a little bit more into how we are working with our customers and what we have to offer and what we've done. So we have a number of infrastructure projects. We have programs, I should say. We have incentive programs to support our customers in electrification. Charge Ready Transport is a program that seeks to electrify nearly 8,500 medium-duty, heavy-duty vehicles. And we provide the electric infrastructure for charging for those vehicles. For Charge Ready Light Duty, we seek to install 22,000 EV chargers, light duty level 2 chargers primarily. Rule 29 is our commercial EV tariff, and it allows customers to install fast chargers as well as any light duty or medium duty, heavy duty chargers they like. We do have a drayage truck rebate that offers up to $150,000 rebate for any new electric drayage truck, and it is stackable with other grants and rebates such as HVIP. And then realize this looks like alphabet soup, but the ZETBIF is the zero emission truck and bus infrastructure financing, and it is basically a loan guarantee for our customers to finance either new or repowered electric trucks and buses. We have economic development services for customers who are looking to bring their business. We have a whole team that is there to support them and looking at access to capital, financial programs, and incentives to bring their business here to our territory. We do TE advisory services, where we will do EV readiness studies for our customers. We'll do load management planning. And this is really for those customers who think they want to electrify, but they're not quite far on the journey yet. We'll even also help them find grant funding. We have online tools and calculators that do total cost of ownership, find grants, do comparisons for electric rates. And then we have a system called Dr. PEP, where customers can look up where we have capacity and where we have capacity constrained areas if they have flexibility on where they're siting their project. What we've accomplished to date is we've installed over 6,800 light duty ports. We've installed over 2,100 commercial EV ports, and we've supported nearly 2,700 medium duty and heavy duty EVs being adopted. We have nearly $300 million in rebates paid from our low carbon fuel standard funded programs. That's through CARB. We have 53 million plus for our pre-owned EV rate for that light duty EVs. And then over $141 million that we've distributed in rebates through our California Clean Fuel Reward Program. Next slide, please. So as I wrap up, I think the main point that I want to share is we have support for our customers who want to electrify before, during, and after they choose to electrify. The key is we really want our customers to think of us as partners in their electrification journey. We want them to engage with us early and often as they start to think about their plans. We have support to install EV infrastructure for them. We have account managers, as I mentioned, economic development, TE advisory services to help support their transition to electric or transition to building a business in our service territory. We have technical support, and then multiple programs and incentives to help our customers pay for this. As well as from the grid side of things, we're working hard to proactively upgrade the grid where we know the load is going to show, and then bridging solutions to help our customers get there. The last thing I'll end with, because I do like to use this last point as an opportunity to just share the 6 areas that dictate how long it takes to get an EV infrastructure project completed. The first one is the type of project. We have a make-ready project where we actually will build the customer side infrastructure and build and design and project manage customer side and utility side. And then we have our commercial EV tariffs. It takes longer for us to work on kind of the more, I'll call it concierge service, where we do everything. Another factor that influences how long one of these EV projects take is whether or not we have the capacity immediately available and if we need to upgrade the grid. A third factor is the site characteristics. So if it's a clean site, we can actually kind of do the construction much quicker. We've had sites where maybe there's environmental issues that need to be remediated before we can do construction, or maybe there's lots of gas lines underneath and hand digging needs to be done rather than machine digging. So that will impact the time. The time it takes to get materials and equipment will impact the timeline. We've had a crunch on some of that in prior years, but that's smoothed out lately for like switchgear and transformers. The time it takes to get permits and easements, licenses, that is another factor that influences how long it takes to complete these projects. And then lastly, just the good engagement with the customer, making sure we're getting information from the customer that's accurate and timely, influences how long it takes. So there's really 6 factors. And I'd like to say, if you ask how long it takes to construct an EV infrastructure project, it's akin to asking a question on how long does it take to build a house? And it's like, well, it depends. Is it, a 5,000 square foot house or a 1,000 square foot house? Is it on a hill or is it on flat land? Do you have to demolish something first or not? And so that's just a little bit of an analogy on how long it takes to build these projects. But Southern California Edison is working with our customers to get these projects built as fast as possible. It is something that we want and we desire for our clean energy future. And we are thinking of ways to do that outside of the box as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chanel.
Okay, next we have Jason Hills from LADWP. I see he's on. We'll pull up your presentation.
Good morning. Jason Hills here, Director of Engineering Division within the Power System at LADWP. Thank you for inviting me here to speak today. LADWP serves over 1.4 million customers, and that includes 4 million residents and businesses. We're the largest municipal water and power utility in the country. What I wanted to discuss with you all today is our infrastructure planning and development efforts in support of zero-emission vehicle charging. So next slide, please. Okay, so the 3 areas I'll briefly plan to touch on include grid readiness, what we're doing to ensure a reliable and resilient grid as we adopt more electrification. Additionally, load growth planning. I'll discuss how we're prepping for the significant increase in load, and then transportation electrification, some specific programs and efforts we've taken on to encourage and streamline transportation electrification within the city of Los Angeles. Next slide, please. Beginning with grid readiness. Next slide. Okay, so with regard to grid readiness, two specific efforts I'd like to highlight are our Power System Reliability Program, we call it PSRP, and procurement. For PSRP, we're ramping up our proactive replacements of key grid components such as poles, conductors, and transformers. So we have a plan to ramp them up over a, say, 10-year period to ensure that we have all our equipment up to date, existing in the expected life of each piece of equipment. And in doing so, we're also upgrading where it makes sense. So we do factor in load growth and include upgrades of our circuits, transformers, and so forth as part of this program. We have our reliability indices, which we use as one of our primary ways to benchmark how we do relative to other industry partners and also relative to ourselves over time. It includes tracking average duration of outages as well as average frequency of outages that a customer experiences. And lastly, we have a robust inspection program which helps us identify our worst condition assets and is used as an input for the items I mentioned above. With regard to procurement, I did watch one of the committee meetings a few months back. That was one of the items that was highlighted as a concern. We do experience and recognize there's a long lead for a lot of these major components, one of which is the large power transformers, which can take years to procure. So we have recognized that, and we are pursuing other methods of procuring our large transformers. Typically, we're bound to the lowest bid, but we are going through an RFP process in order to allow us to acquire transformers that can help bypass or not bypass, but mitigate issues that may come up, such as tariffs, which we're experiencing now, and also to further encourage other vendors and manufacturers to bid on the procurement requests that we're making. So we're in progress in establishing that RFP for these large transformers for a larger batch to allow us to purchase transformers over a longer period of time as well. Additionally, we have other solutions that we have available to us in times of deep need. We do have mutual aid agreements with other utilities around us that'll allow us to, say, borrow other assets that are critical to ensure that certain projects can be completed in a timely manner. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I'm going to dive into our load growth planning. So one project that you are all very aware of is the port electrification, zero emissions goals that they have there. So we've been working for many years with the port partners in forecasting their needs. So what you see there is just a simple rolled up table of the existing load that we've seen from them over the past few years, as well as the new demand that we're anticipating. So earlier on, a couple of years ago, we partnered with the Harbor Department, got partnered up with an entity called the Electric Power Research Institute, and conducted a study where they would even go on site to various terminal operator sites and better understand what their load growth needs would be. From that study, we got an initial demand estimate, which we then began our large-scale planning efforts off of. That was a couple of years ago. Now we are continuously engaging with the port and the terminal operators, getting more specific demand numbers from them now that they have more concrete plans. And those are the latest numbers that you see on the right, which we are planning and building accordingly to support. Next slide, please. And what you see in this slide are more detailed plans that we have. This is the proposed subtransmission infrastructure in order to support that increase in load. Of course, it's currently our proposed, and as we go along and learn more, we continuously look to modify and improve on this to ensure that we can meet their requirements. You see here 3 different phases. Well, the current phase, which we're in right now, and then phase 1. So we do understand that there are some projects that are tied to certain grid or to certain grant funded projects, which we are ensuring that we can meet their power needs in order to receive that funding. So that's what phase one is. And then phase two is the large scale upgrade that rolls up to the demand numbers that you saw on the previous slide. So quite a lot of circuitry being built in addition to substation upgrades. We have our receiving station Q, receiving station C. Those are our large stations, which are going to require those large transformers I discussed, as well as somewhere in the realm of about 18 miles of sub-transmission circuitry. Additionally, this will require additional substations to feed the various terminal operators. So, in summary, we've been working very closely with the harbor department as well as terminal operators to create the infrastructure plans to support their needs. The next slide, please. Okay, so rolling back to grid level. So what we've also been doing is assessing the electrification impact on our substations. As Chanel was mentioning, one of the things that we do need is earlier information from the customers as to where specifically they are going to be building their projects and how much capacity they're going to need and so forth. So that information tends to come later, which is does pose a challenge for us. But what we've done is we've conducted an analysis of where generally we anticipate the increase in electrification load to be and which substations are going to be impacted the most. So what you see here are 3 different time frames. We've identified which stations are maxed out in capacity and need either some relief or some new stations, which ones have limited capacity, and which ones have enough capacity to support additional electrification based on load forecasts. We have input data received through CEC. Also, we get some data from the DMV. And also, we've partnered again with EPRI, Electric Power Research Institute, to obtain some forecasts as to where this load may be coming online. So we have the data, and we're using it to develop our plans for upgrading our substations. So at least those major upgrades that and Chanel mentioned could take 5 years, 10 years, so forth, so that we can dive into those earlier rather than later when the requests for service is needed for these large scale projects. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we look to expand our existing substations as well as build new substation in strategic areas listed there. Another item that I didn't mention is DWP is a pretty old utility, and we operate on a 5 kilovolt system. So it's a lower voltage, which means it also has lower capacity. So whenever you put a couple of fast chargers on a circuit, it does make a larger impact. So one of the things that we are doing is upgrading our voltage. We're introducing a new voltage to our system. And this is actually being initiated over in the Palisades as we're going about rebuilding over there. So that is one of the major initiatives that we're embarking on in order to increase our capacity and an ability to serve these large loads quicker. And lastly, I already mentioned the power system reliability program just to ensure a reliable and resilient grid as we support and become the fuel source for vehicles throughout the region. Next slide. Okay. Okay, moving on to our transportation electrification programs. So I believe it's been many years that we've been heavily involved in incentivizing and supporting electric vehicle programs. We do have programs that support more specifically medium and heavy duty EVs that include vans, buses, and trucks. To date, we've issued more than $4 million in rebates for the large chargers that support these vehicles. So we do have a program for medium heavy duty EV projects, in addition to the standard commercial and residential EV charging programs that we have. We also have a lot of projects in the queue with over nearly 100 additional chargers already planned for reimbursement through our rebates. And the rebate that we have for these medium heavy duty charging projects is up to $125,000 per charger. It depends on the kilowatt power output. Next slide. So we also understand some of the pain points that customers have had. One being that historically customers would be responsible for any upgrades needed to support their large-scale EV project. So if there was a multi-mile circuit that needed to be ran to their site, they would be responsible for that cost. So 2 years ago, we implemented what's called the Fair Share Power Line Program, which allows customers to share the cost of line extensions with other future customers. So basically, we break it down into segments and identify where there may be potential future customers, and then we only charge the current customers that are building out their infrastructure right now based on what their remaining balance would be minus the future customer anticipated expenditure. So it has provided a significant amount of relief for customers. We are just starting to see these projects being completed, at which point the customers are recognizing the benefit from this program. So it is providing a significant cost relief in addition to the rebate programs that we offer. We also have a dedicated EV service planning design group dedicated specifically to handle any jobs that involve EV charger installations to help streamline that effort. And then we also have other process improvement projects in the currently ongoing actively. One effort we call Kaizen, looking to constantly improve process and never settle. We're going through that effort right now to evaluate step by step the steps that it takes to support a project from customer submittal to being energized, and with a goal to reduce timelines for those new service requests. So we are heavily engaged in supporting electrification and understand the need that the need and support partnership that's required of the utilities. So, I believe that's the end of my slides. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jason. We have one final speaker, so we'll go ahead and turn to Jonathan Raspa from SCAG, and we'll pull those slides up. Great.
All right, thanks. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for giving SCAG the opportunity to share our work on our zero-emission truck infrastructure study, which we recently completed this year. Next slide, please. A real quick introduction. I'm Jonathan Raspa. I was the project manager for the ZETI project. That's our acronym for the name. We had a really great project team as well, combined with the CEC, EPRI, and CalSTART. This was really a partnership project between SCAG and the state of California's broader e-truck project that focused on highway charging infrastructure throughout the state. And the CEC was generous enough to fund our work with a grant from that program. Next slide, please. So a really quick overview of what the ZETI study was all about. It was really aiming to define or develop a refined understanding of trucking markets like drayage, long haul, B2B delivery, and their potential energy demand on a future public charging network. We know that companies are standing up depots, but there's also going to be public demand to support middle of trip charging and operators that don't have their own charging infrastructure already developed. We also wanted to support developing a consistent set of siting criteria. Everyone has a different approach as to what's important, because we want to be able to efficiently utilize the potential supply of existing land for stations, right? The most we can go after existing sites that can be converted rather than a full-scale redevelopment. We also developed a regionally vetted action plan through stakeholder engagement, collaboration with our partner agencies, and others that supported SCAG's goals of a green future. We also tried our best to align with the advanced clean fleet regulations and really take into account the trucking industry's operational requirements. This shift is not going to happen overnight for a lot of these fleet operators. and really just to create a clear strategy for development that supports the private sector who's implementing a lot of this infrastructure through the policy landscape and incentive programs that were out there. Next slide, please. So I'm going to dive right into the project analysis results because that's what everyone's really been interested in. So our charging simulation, we had a great simulation partner through EPRI that conducted a very detailed agent-based simulation using statewide GPS data to figure out exactly how these trucks would charge, when they would charge, and how much power they would require. And there's a very simplified diagram of that agent-based simulation on the right there that shows, how trucks would start, complete their trip, and potentially charge in the middle of that route. We did make a couple of assumptions here that don't necessarily hold today. One, we assumed a very steady progress to the fleet's transition over to zero-emission vehicles, primarily because we were assuming at the time we started the study that the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation would stay in place. We've had conversations with partners, and I found that this is really just affecting the timeline, but it's not necessarily going to change the industry's intent to switch to zero-emission vehicles. Another important thing is that we didn't utilize any sort of load management or charging management schemes, and that's really important because that can help reduce peak demand at some of these sites up to 20%, depending on the use case and how many vehicles the location would serve. And we looked at both battery electric and hydrogen energy demand across a number of the service markets I mentioned: drayage, long haul, medium duty, heavy duty, local delivery. We looked at the time of day and the size or the capacity of the charger that was being utilized. The other important thing is we wanted to make sure this reflected the movement of trucks today, where they were going, where they'd be moving in the future, and what those key corridors were. So rather than allowing trucks to drive wherever they wanted, we used the statewide truck route network as our base for the transportation system. So they were using primary truck access routes, which operators are familiar with and know they'll be using in the future. And over on the right, there's also a quick summary table of total projected energy demand across each county through the 3 scenario years that we analyzed. So you can see over in 2040, that total 21,000 megawatt hours of demand across the whole system, and then 12,110 megawatt hours on the public side, which is what we were specifically focused on. So again, a lot of private demand that these public stations won't necessarily be supplying. Next slide, please. So the map here, this is really a really important distinction, shows the public peak hourly demand. So in 1 hour, how much energy is going to be utilized by these charging stations across the entire SCAG region. This is what really drives charger capacity requirements and how these sites are going to be developed in the future. In 2030, this was primarily focused around drayage trucks using this, some intermodal activity centers at the ports, rail yards, and near dock facilities. These are some of the first heavy duty markets that we expect to electrify, and they're already in the transition phase right now. The second one that we saw was a lot of demand from medium duty fleets, which are primarily business to business activity or local parcel delivery in urbanized areas. And this is already happening now as well. A lot of parcel carriers are transitioning their fleets to battery electric. This does not include any of that private depot demand. So that other capacity for larger operators with the resources, that's getting stood up on its own and supporting those trucks already. Next slide, please. In 2035, in total amount, we saw the public demand just about double from 2.5 megawatt hours to 2.5 million kilowatts to about 6.7 million kilowatts across the entire region. It's primarily starting to grow to the north along I-5 and a little bit further out into the Inland Empire. And this is really reflecting the expanding range of trucks that are coming into the market and the size of the fleets that are operating. As you have more equipment, you can position it sort of further away from your home base of operations and support additional deliveries or work. We also saw a little bit of additional line haul and long haul capacity come online in 2035. And that's what really drove those additional increases along the I-10 and the I-40. There's a lot of cross-border traffic between Arizona and Nevada that's coming through the SCAG region, both from the ports and light manufacturing and medium duty manufacturing that happens in Southern California. Next slide, please. And by 2040, we basically see the demand just about double again to 12 million kilowatt hours. And at this point, long haul corridors in particular are fully developed by 2040, increasing that public demand at additional truck stops along the 40, the I-10, also heading down towards Imperial County, where there's a fair amount of cross-border traffic at the border crossings there. We also know that Baja California is developing their own zero-emission truck charging infrastructure as well, and they said this was more or less on pace with when they expect to be standing up charging capacity in those areas. So that dovetailed very nicely. We also see demand really starting to peak quite high in urbanized areas and in warehousing districts across the region. And an important note is the majority share of public demand, so about 70% of that 12 million kilowatt hours, is utilized by long haul trucks, which are going to have the highest energy demand since they don't have the ability to stop at a home base. They're going sort of point to point throughout their different delivery work. Or regional trucks that are operated by smaller operators that don't have their own depots to charge at. And that's one of the markets that we're primarily concerned with, because resource constraint for smaller operators, we don't meet that need. It will slow the transition to zero emission trucks across the region. And there are a lot of medium duty trucks that operate in Southern California. Next slide, please. We also dove in a little bit into each county and looked at what the potential mix of chargers was within those counties and along some potential site locations. And this will really be different depending on how a region wants to prioritize certain markets that operate within the county or in sort of key areas, how they want to operate the sites. Some site developers are going to put in a small number of high-powered fast chargers that will allow trucks to pull in, stop, top off quickly, and then head out and continue work. While other site operators will focus more as like a public depot where operators can pull in and charge for a longer period of time at low power, maybe take a lunch break. If it's their overnight portion, they can actually get their rest for the evening and then start work again the next day. You can see over on the right, there's two potential combinations of different charger power levels in San Bernardino County. One of them utilizes a large number of 150 or lower power chargers, and only a few higher power chargers at the 750 and 1000 kilowatt power levels. Another option would be to forego those lower power chargers, assuming that some private depots will provide that demand, and focus on higher power charging stations that, again, can get those trucks in and out. And a lot of this, I think, like the other presenters mentioned, is going to be constrained by grid capacity. That's a very important factor here, as well as site availability. You can't just develop these sites anywhere you want. You have to be cognizant of low-income communities, anyone who's already being affected by some of the pollution from trucking routes that pass through their areas. And then just making sure that these sites are being developed, again, where trucks are and where they go throughout the region. We can't stand up a site in the middle of nowhere. The sort of, if you build it, they will come approach. That really doesn't work here, is what we heard from a lot of our outreach partners. Next slide, please. And the second thing that we did is, great, we know how much energy, but which sites are most suitable for this demand. And so we stood up a siting prioritization tool, and this really helped us screen all of the parcels in the SCAG region to narrow it down to locations that met certain criteria that were developed by our technical advisory committee. It is not a build here because this is the best place tool, but really just to help us refine and guide eventual site analysis so that site developers or agencies are not looking at every site in their jurisdiction, but just a few, where they know they'll get the most value out of developing it. And there were 5 categories, sort of the overall utilization of the site, a lot of the land characteristics in place, land use, access, size. We added an equity component to make sure we were addressing the state's SB 535 equity communities. We also included grid capacity using some of the tools that LADWP and SoCal Edison mentioned to make sure we were going to places that had some of that additional capacity on those circuits. And then there was some environmental characteristics as well that we looked at. So a lot of these sites were screened out simply because they weren't large enough. There was not sufficient grid capacity. where it was something like a residential parcel, right? You're not going to tear down homes in the middle of a housing crisis to build a truck charging site. So some common sense approaches that helped us screen down quite a bit. Next slide, please. So we analyzed 5 million parcels in the SCAG region, and only 460 of those met the base kind of criteria. And refining further, about 300,000 met the land use requirements. So we screened out a lot of residential or protected parcels that you couldn't really develop on this site anyway. You can see there kind of the breakdown of small, medium, and large parcels out of those 460,000. So we refined further. And then the overall energy demand at all of them. A lot of them had much lower energy demand, and only a few sites had really high demand that we expected to see out of that simulation. And those were in urbanized areas and major truck facilities throughout the region. So again, a lot of that demand is very low energy, not requiring you to stand up a huge amount of circuit capacity to support the demand. Can we advance the slide, please? Just one. Great, and then here's a breakdown of overall load capacity for all the sites that we analyzed. Again, most of them we know did not have load capacity, and that was reflected in the overall prioritization tool. But we did see that a little bit over 5,000 had partial or full capacity to meet the demand that was projected through 2040. And then there's a breakdown of overall scoring, where again, most parcels scored low, but we had about 6,000 or so that scored above kind of that middle range. This also showed us, there's not very many high scoring sites out of 10. There is no perfect location to develop these sites. There will be compromises and adjustments made from public agencies that are allowing the development, from the private sector that needs to stand it up, and from the utilities. So that everyone has to sort of meet in the middle and make some compromises and contribute to the development of this. And that's in funding, in the regulatory approach, that's in education for operators on how to do this site development, in partnership with everyone who helps stand it up. The other thing that we saw here is that, that's all right, is that with the partial capacity, in some ways, there's ways to address demand without new grid development. Go after those low-hanging parcels that overlap with current demand now and build what capacity you can, even if it's at a small scale, to just start meeting that demand and getting site operators and truckers sort of used to what this is going to look like in the future. Now, next slide, please. And I'm just going to show a couple of different locations. Jump forward, but that's okay. That first location, this is in South LA. This makes a lot of sense. It's adjacent to rail yards, intermodal facilities, and industrial areas. And so you had a lot of high scoring parcels there that met both the demand constraints and had the space to adequately provide some of the chargers that were needed. And a lot of locations in this area are already developing chargers in place. Next, please. Right. This is another really interesting area. So this is in the Rancho Dominguez area, not far from Carson, which is another major warehousing and industrial hub in the region. It sees a lot of truck traffic. A lot of sites here didn't see high levels of demand or high scores, but it was widely distributed across the area. And these parcels were much smaller in many cases. And this is sort of the argument we're making for this sort of scattered site, smaller scale development, where maybe each one of these locations highlighted in blue only has maybe 2 or 3 or 4 chargers, but they're starting to serve that demand. Operators can see, sort of what's needed without making a massive capital investment or waiting 5 to 10 years, for like a new substation to be built, like Jason and Chanel were talking about. So again, small scale investment, start to meet the load demand now to understand the operational requirements and the capital assets need to build this out in the future. Next image, please. So this is a third site. These were a bunch of, our third area near the Ontario airport. These were, as another example, it sort of illustrates how you need to have a local understanding of how truck markets operate in your agency. You just don't want to take these analysis results at their face value. This is a huge warehouse area just by the Ontario airport. It has very low scores, which doesn't really make sense because there's a lot of demand. But we know that there are a lot of trucks operating here. We know it's critical to develop capacity here, regardless of the score. To take those scores at face value and develop elsewhere would run counter to another one of, I think, both SCAG's and the state's goals, which is to really reduce the overall VMT of truck fleets in California. And so even though we've got low scores here, we would develop to avoid these trucks shifting elsewhere to charge overnight or do opportunity charging. We don't want trucks diverting really far from their normal routes just to get this energy they require to then drive all the way back. It reduces operational efficiency and costs for fleets, so they're less interested in electrifying those routes. So, again, really thinking about how trucks are operating through the region, where their major stopping points are, and making sure we're increasing charging capacity in those locations as well. And next slide, please. And the last piece is we did a few site assessments to serve as examples of how sites would be developed. So we did 24 site assessments. I'm going to focus on the electric side of things. The hydrogen markets behaved similarly, so they're roughly parallel to each other. And we looked at a couple of different typologies: small, medium, large sites, the use cases, and then the context in which they were going to be situated. We also tried to avoid overlapping with existing site development. We didn't want to say, you need a site here where there was already a truck charging site in operation. So we avoided those obvious locations where we knew there was already a focus. So we're going to talk really quickly, next slide please, about a battery electric medium-sized site in a mixed-use context. Next slide please, sorry, I just want to show. And here's a map of the different site assessments we did. You can see this is sort of moving a little bit further outward from the major truck corridors and urbanized areas to illustrate, like, we want to better understand areas that are going to be in development maybe in 2030 or 2035, where there isn't the capacity or power already run to those areas, but we know it will be needed in the future. Next slide, please. So this is this is the full site assessment cut sheet that we put together. It shows an aerial view, land use, general characteristics of the site. We share the scoring, suitability, the level of charging demand. We did some cost estimation and capacity sizing, and then a few key considerations for each one. And we did a couple of different things here that we know are going to be important for developers in the future, but is not really being done now, is we knew that peak demand would drive how large these sites would be, and in turn, the cost to scale that infrastructure up. So we included battery backup systems in our cost assessment, because that can really help with shaving peak demand off at critical periods and allow the site to be sized a little bit smaller, place a little bit less demand on the grid. There's some cost savings included there in for an operator to purchase power. And again, it just makes the site a little bit more flexible in serving demand, even as that maybe shifts over time. And then people or agencies that are going to be developing their own zero emission blueprints should really think about assessing sites this way as well, having all of these pieces in place, not just maybe land use or cost or demand, but really developing a comprehensive set of assessment points. That is not to say that local planning should not be part of this. We also recognize that local planning can much better leverage their knowledge of grid infrastructure at individual parcels. And same with the utilities. You know your systems best. And so what we're not trying to do is preempt that local knowledge or system knowledge that others bring to the table. But this is just one piece of that partnership to stand up charging sites throughout the region. Next slide, please. And I'll just talk through a little bit of the next steps and recommendations that came out of the study. So one of the things we did is we were very focused on engagement with the freight industry. So we were talking across the industry to fleet operators of all sizes, original equipment manufacturers, charging equipment manufacturers, dealerships, utilities. We really brought as wide of a cast of characters into our TAC so that we could understand the full picture of what was needed. We have a lot of regular check-ins with our regional stakeholders as well. We're always talking to the freight industry now, even if it's not about a zero emissions on the specific call or meeting. We still check in and say, hey, how's it going with your battery electric trucks? Are you able to stand up charging infrastructure? What do costs look like? What are your problems? Just checking in and asking those questions really helps us understand what's going on. And we also try to make sure we're staying abreast of local funding sources to make sure that, when partners are going after money, that we're aligned on the same goals and we can provide support, whether it's technical or even just a simple letter of support to the granting agency. Another really key thing that came out of our outreach and that we want to see implemented across this effort is to keep the policy landscape as streamlined and as simple as possible for applicants or regulated entities to encourage that uptake of this fleet transition. This was a huge theme in our outreach. It's a very complicated space for someone who's maybe owning 1 or 2 trucks and really hasn't had to think about the complex permitting process and equipment sizing process to even purchase a single charger. They don't really have an equivalent. This is brand new for a lot of operators. So we really want to make sure this is simple, that we offer a lot of helping hands and supports. I think both Jason and Chanel talked about some of the programs that they've stood up, and that's a really great example of helping to educate all of the stakeholders in this process. If the truck operators and fleet drivers don't know what to ask or who to ask, they're not going to know how to start this process, and they'll point a finger at the utility or the regulator, the bottleneck in the position. But it really is incumbent on the industry as well to sort of start to educate itself on some of these needs. The last piece is really being strategic about incentive programs. There's a wide mix of funding programs out there, and we want to make sure that it's easy for an applicant to utilize them to sort of meet the cost of purchasing both the trucks themselves, which are still quite expensive for most operators, and then the charging equipment as well. It's not inexpensive to find a parcel, get that ready, go through the permitting process, get power brought to it if it doesn't have it, purchase equipment and get it all installed. Again, it's brand new for a lot of folks in this space. The incentive strategy, I think, is also, we saw a little bit in flux with the potential loss of federal funds or regulatory authority in California. But again, a lot of these California entities and local agencies are already pivoting and meeting with each other and coordinating to maintain sort of the momentum that we built up over the past few years to create that clean truck fleet in the future. And just really quickly, SCAG itself, we're looking to integrate this ZETI project into our regional transportation plan. So Connect SoCal 2050, we're starting that process right now. We have a whole section dedicated to freight, and a big emphasis in this one is going to be zero emission technology, clean fleets, and how to build out this infrastructure for the future. We also have our last mile freight program. We finished phase 1, which awarded $16 million to near zero and zero emission truck purchases for heavy duty fleets in the region. Phase 2 is $50 million that's going to be focused on class 4 and 5 medium duty trucks. That's going to have both a incentive and scrappage program to get some of these smaller business to business and delivery trucks converted to zero emission technology. And then finally, we're also starting the process of a comprehensive sustainable regional freight plan for SCAG. We don't do this very often, about every 10 to 15 years. So this is a big update to the previous sort of understanding the needs of the system of systems in Southern California. And we're really going to be integrating zero emission technology, zero emission trucks, and cleaning up the air for a lot of the affected communities in the SCAG region. So thanks again for the time. That's all I've got. My contact information is here, and happy to take any questions about our project if anyone has any.
Okay, that concludes all of our speakers. I think they are available for questions if that's so desired by the committee as well.
Okay, thank you. Board members, any questions for the presenters? I see Councilmember Rahman.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, good morning.
Okay, well, thanks for these great presentations. It went a little, for me, my schedule, we have a council meeting that starts now. So I just wanted to express my gratitude to all 3 presenters. I thought these were really substantive presentations. And thank you, Chairwoman, for bringing these forward and for making sure that we're hearing from them. I had just a question about the kind of the operationalization of the SCAG study. Like, this is incredible. This is such a meaty, detailed presentation, and has so much good data for how we plan for a cleaner future. It's so important. Like, this is really one of the most substantial things I've seen that can help us chart that pathway forward across the entire region. So I'm curious about how you're engaging with LADWP, SoCal Edison, with with local jurisdictions like the city of LA, like, you know, is someone in the city of LA besides DWP is obviously with the city of LA, but also with the broader kind of environmental infrastructure and planning infrastructure in the city of LA. Curious about what engagement there has been there.
So, like I said, we're planning to integrate this into all of our planning work and technical assistance that we have for local jurisdictions that are SCAG member agencies. So that's always ongoing. Every presentation I gave at some of our committees, we had follow-up from different jurisdictions throughout the region, which was great. It shows that local electeds are really engaged on this and know it's a critical issue. So we continue that regularly. We provide updates.
What about
we're also open to sharing. So DWP, SoCal Edison, and SoCal Gas were all members of our TAC. I don't think we had some of the same folks in the room here, and that's part of the engagement. I think getting connected to Chanel and Jason and their teams is really important. I learned some things from their presentation, and that's things that we'll take back to our stakeholders. And then we're also willing to share all of our data, that granular data and findings with any of our partners. We've already worked with Caltrans District 7, SoCal Gas, and some other local agencies who are interested in just sort of integrating our findings. That was one of the goals. Let's not do this analysis over and over and over again for each jurisdiction, but let SCAG do this big lift, and then everyone can leverage the work. So that's one of the biggest things that we bring. We don't necessarily bring the most funding, but
if there's a way to facilitate that happening through kind of partnership with the city council, I'm very happy to take this back and figure out how to operationalize some of this planning work, particularly in advance of also kind of Olympics. There's Olympics bus decarb and electrification planning happening. So I just want to make sure that all of these conversations are happening in the same places. And I had a question for DWP as well, if that's okay, if I could ask one more. For DWP, I know that you had reported on some of this in city council meetings as well, related to kind of ports planning. Given the competing demands on DWP's time and kind of capacity, including Palisades rebuild, which is so crucial and a new area of priority focus for you, as well as now there was detailed discussion of convention center needs and Olympics timelines there. How does that impact your timelines for the ports work? Are they different? Is it unimpacted, or is there going to be kind of deprioritization or changing of timelines as a result?
So I believe it was, I was actually there at the council meetings for the convention center where some of this discussion went on. And one thing that was communicated is, yes, it does impact us. However, we are now working on some external resource support to help augment our ability to serve both the convention center, the Palisades, in addition to the port. So we are still targeting to support these goals for the port.
But so just so I understand, because it's going to be it is going to impact the timelines.
We're working on contract resources to maintain the timelines.
Got it.
So,
okay. So, and how will we know kind of the changes in timelines for existing projects? How can we get briefed on that? How can we understand the impacts on kind of DWP's capacity?
So I'll go back to our team, work with our internal folks, and then we can report back to you. We can engage with your council district directly and communicate that with you and see how you'd like that presented.
I appreciate that. And Chairwoman, thank you again. I unfortunately have a council meeting commitment that I'm going to have to leave for, but I want to express my gratitude to everyone who presented. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Mitchell.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks all for the presentations. I appreciated the analogy about, how long it takes in the comparison to building a house. I think for me as a policymaker, the question is, really for everyone, do you foresee many of the delays being technology and kind of infrastructure delays? Or are there policy decisions around things like permitting that need to take place to help you expedite, kind of clarifying what bucket some of the delays falls in, so we know what we can do to try to change some of those opportunities or create better opportunities would be helpful for me.
Thank you, Supervisor Mitchell. I'll jump in there first. I will say a couple of years ago, the biggest bottleneck for us was supply chain. And we were seeing a lot of tightening of supply chain for big equipment pieces like switchgear and transformers. We've since created a solve for that. Obviously, as the landscape changes, things might change again, but we feel much more comfortable with the timeline it takes to get the material we need. Permitting and various approvals, easements, licensing has always been kind of the long pole in the tent. And we have some projects, local small projects, where we wait 6 to 9 to 12 months just to get a permit, and we can't schedule resources until we get the permit, obviously, because we don't know when we can schedule them. And for really large projects, transmission level projects, it's years sometimes before we get all of the siting, licensing, permits, and approvals to start the work. So I think that, we've been advocating, and anything that can support streamlining and speeding up permitting approvals, licensing, easements will help speed up the overall timeline.
And I'll agree with Chanel on that. Permitting, licensing, that would greatly help. Anything to expedite that. And additionally, something that was discussed about just educating and Jonathan mentioned that as well. It's just educating the owners of the facilities that are going to be charging, so that the utilities can know more specifically how much capacity is needed and where the soonest that we can possible, and so we can just get started. So that education component, somehow of improving that.
And from your perspective, like who's kind of on point to do that education element? Whose job is that from your perspective?
So we actually had some conversations with both site developers and trucking fleets who are kind of engaged in the permitting process with the city. And what they saw was that depending on the city, they will treat these differently. Some consider it a gas station, some consider it a parking lot, some consider it a truck stop, which is maybe different from just a charging facility that doesn't have the full suite of amenities a truck stop would have. So again, that sort of consistency in what this is defined as in the development process is important. And then we also saw that there was sometimes some gaps in knowledge on either like the permit desk having a difficult time sort of knowing how to understand what was being asked of them, and then having their inspectors being trained up to make sure they understood that this was not maybe a passenger vehicle charging site, but it's a truck charging site. The power requirements are higher. The operational requirements are different. It's also very different from bus operations. The vehicle technology and the sort of operational cycle is different. So this is not like a bus depot. It's very different when it's supporting either short distance or long distance trucking. And I mentioned there was also permit streamlining through the state with AB 1236 and AB 970. But what was missing for there was a lot of resources pushed to local jurisdictions, again, to provide that training and bridge that knowledge gap. So it is incumbent, I think, on the local jurisdictions. I think the state can support and have really targeted outreach and engagement efforts with them to educate them on the demands of truck charging, which again, it's so different from a passenger vehicle.
That's true. Last question, Madam Chair, and because what I'm hearing really in response to that last question is the need for coordination, and one example I've consistently heard is the perceived, at least, lack of coordination or communication between the Port of LA and LADWP. So has that improved, and what can we do to help improve coordination between all of these, vested interests?
I feel we've actually had good coordination with the Port of LA. We have regular meetings with the Harbor Department. We also have, I think our recent meeting in July, a larger meeting with the marine terminal operators. We started like a biannual kind of higher level meeting with them. Every couple weeks, I see meetings of staff with the marine terminal operators individually. So there's already a lot of coordination going on right now, especially over, I'd say, the past 2 years with them.
And I'm hoping that coordination is leading to the other C word, cooperation. So thank you for the, excellent. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Supervisor Bettis.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the presentations. I think they were great as well. And I think the questions that we're asking are very important questions. And thank you to staff, Vanessa, our chairwoman, for bringing this forward because I think you heard it already. This is the meat, I think, that we sometimes are lacking on the ground for us to truly understand what's going on so that when we're building up policy, if you will, at AQMD, we're able to kind of connect the dots here and see how we could maybe coordinate our efforts with yours when it comes to votes, when it comes to concerns, issues, what have you, policy overall, right? But I want to just ask that, obviously it's a large footprint we're talking about here, and I noticed I have questions for every single one of you, but there's just no time. And I think that if possible, I'd like to reach out to you all to further have discussion with you. One entity that's missing at this table is IID. Obviously, that's in my district on the south end, but we have SCE on the west end. And I just wanted to better understand microgrids and how you're going about that. Obviously, we're talking about a very rural agricultural area as you come this way, and where, the fact that we need more infrastructure. And as well, we talked about the truck situation. Distribution centers are coming this way as well. And you talked about siting, and I saw very minimal siting out here up until 2040, I think it was, on your spreadsheets or on the documents you shared with us here, your PowerPoint. And I would say that I think it's going to go faster than that. It's already coming as we speak. And the traffic is not going to end anytime soon because this is the fastest growing area in Southern California. So there's just a lot of questions. I'm just wondering if I can just reach out to you because I would love to have briefings and then as well, maybe just some time with you as opposed to taking all the time here because I think we have to do some votes as well. And I also know that I got to get off in about 20 minutes or so. 10:30, that is, I think. So
Happy to
thank you all.
follow up, Supervisor, offline.
Thank you.
Same.
Very good point. And the only thing I wanted to add was perhaps there's a way to fold this into our retreat, our annual retreat, so we can have a longer study session. Not everybody's getting to hear this presentation, and it really was substantive, and I have more questions than time permits. So, but thank you for taking the time to do this. I think we have a role here in helping to, commingle our resources and see how we can help this effort. So thank you again. Let's take any questions from the public. We have one hand raised so far. Assuming there's nobody in person at any of the locations, I'll start with Al Sattler.
Thank you very much. This has been very encouraging. I'm glad, in particular, that SCAG has really been out there, but I also hear good things from what DWP has been doing for planning, interacting with the port and the terminal operators. I have a few questions. Let's see. Okay. For, I guess, additional generation is one of the big questions here. But I was wondering whether even it would help to have in-basin generation solar panels on every possible site, in particular warehouses. There was certainly one warehouse that's going through its approval process in the city of LA, the Prologis warehouse. And if more solar panels could be stacked onto that, that would certainly be one help. And, I've seen, solar panels on a lot of warehouses just from aerial views, but I think we should really work on maximizing that. Um, I don't know what role, if any, there would be for the Clean Power Alliance in here, community choice aggregation. Um, and again, additional transmission. I know the law was just passed this past session in the state legislature, calling for state financing of some large transmission lines rather than having that added to the base tariff or whatever for private utilities. I'm not sure where that comes in. Um, and let's see. I guess I was very encouraged to hear the comment that electrification will be happening even if we're facing this unfortunate delay. And Siting of transmission lines, I would wonder whether you might consider reaching out to various local stakeholders to have a process similar to what was done for deciding on siting of solar in the desert. I mean, let's face it, there are competing priorities, competing viewpoints about what's important. I'm actually going to say between those who want to have habitat and those who really want to move forward on maximum electrification, and then those concerned about views. So um, anyway, I don't want to throw brickbats too much, but those are important questions.
Thank you. Staff, is there anything that we can reply with or direct to the speakers?
We can try to reach out to Mr. Sadler offline.
Okay, good idea. I don't see any other hands raised online. And so we'll move on to the next item. Thank you, speakers, again. Items 2 through 4 are written reports. Are there any presentations or any materials to review on those? Don't see any board members, any questions on those? Any comments from the community? I don't see hands raised for items 2 through 4. We'll move on to other business. I don't have any other business to bring up. Does anybody on the committee have other business?
Are there any votes that we're taking today at all on the agenda? I can't.
No. All right, so I'll open up to public comment period. Item number 6. These are 3 minutes for items that are not on the agenda. I have one hand raised or 2. Okay, we'll start with Fernando Gaitan.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Fernando Gaitan with Earth Justice. I want to speak today about the proposed cooperative agreement with the ports. I want to start by noting that Governor Newsom has vetoed Senate Bill SB 34. And in his veto message, he recognized that agencies like the South Coast AQMD must have all the tools on the table to tackle serious problems of air pollution and its devastating impacts on public health. That message aligns with the statements made by Executive Officer Wayne Nestry and other leaders of this agency stated before the state legislatures during the hearings that the district's ability to use every available tool, including rulemaking, is essential to meeting the state, federal air standards and protecting communities, and that it offered robust community engagement. So that's noteworthy. And yet, in just a few weeks, you'll be asked to consider a draft cooperative agreement with the ports that only addresses infrastructure, leaving for future negotiations the key measures that would actually reduce emission sources. Despite this limited scope, the board will also be asked to approve a resolution that would instruct staff not to pursue any rulemaking related to all the other port sources for 5 years, despite not having those measures fully fleshed out. To my knowledge, there is no precedent for this agency to voluntarily relinquish its regulatory authority for half a decade, especially without binding assurances that enforceable measures will be in place. This approach would handcuff the agency at a time when it can least afford it. And we need decisive action now. You instructed staff to negotiate in the past. You've instructed them to negotiate, but with time limits, and while keeping rulemaking on the table as far back, as a fallback if no agreement was reached. It's unclear why this radical new approach, foreclosing rulemaking altogether, is now being proposed. If this is being driven by the port's insistence that they will not negotiate unless they secure this waiver first, then you have to ask yourselves whether these negotiations are being conducted in good faith. In light of the governor's veto message, this agency's mission, I respectfully urge you and the board to reject the proposed resolution and ensure instead that the district more fully retains its authority to further regulate emissions from the ports, even as it's speaking to the ports about these other measures. We recognize that the majority of the board feels that collaborative approach is important, but it cannot come at the cost of this agency's ability to protect the health of millions of residents who continue to breathe the nation's dirtiest air. We urge you to reject a resolution that instructs staff not to pursue rules without measure.
Okay, thank you, Fernando. I didn't realize there were so many hands raised, so I'm going to have to limit the speaker time to a minute and a half. And we'll stop the speakers after Fernando Duarte. I just did want to note, Fernando Gaitan, with all due respect, the veto message also said that the governor was, I don't know what the exact term was, but he was happy to see the cooperative agreement moving forward. All right, with that, we'll move on to Antonio Torres, I believe.
Hello, my name is Antonio Torres, and I'm a public policy major at UC Riverside. And I just wanted to reiterate what I've stated before about me being concerned about the proposed planned agreement you're considering, as it offers only voluntary measures without real accountability. And that is just simply not enough, because if the goals are truly identical, why change the mechanism from binding ISR 2304 rule to a voluntary MOU? I believe it just demands scrutiny because we're asked to trust in infrastructure milestones, but where's the mandatory regulatory authority backing these goals? But more importantly, how can we fix this agreement, guarantee accountability when any party retains the right to exit at any time for any reason? Because it feels like this pattern of replacing mandatory regulation with a supposed cooperative voluntary agreement strongly suggests that the political and economic interests of the ports and logistic industry are being given precedent over the AQMD's core duty to achieve air quality and protect public health. So yeah, and just look at other countries that have dealt with this electric strain and expansion, and there's some alternatives to that. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Marlon Vargas.
Hello, good morning. My name is Marlon Dewoji Vargas with the Long Beach Alliance for Children with Asthma, and I want to comment on the cooperative agreement between AQMD and the port's draft proposal. And I'm speaking yet again because our communities and our health continue to be put in danger. The South Coast AQMD stated mission is to clean the air and protect the health of all residents through practical and innovative strategies. And I'm asking myself, is this the innovative strategy? Because looking at the cooperative agreement, I cannot understand how preventing rulemaking for 5 years on any source of pollution can possibly uphold that mission. The consequences of diesel pollution will not be taking a pause for 5 years. Hospitalizations due to respiratory complications will also not be taking a pause for 5 years. Children unable to attend school or play outside due to asthma episodes will not be taking a pause for 5 years. Part of my job is sharing information with community about how environmental factors impact our health. How would you like me to explain this clause in the agreement to a family with a child gasping for air? Because that is exactly what we will have to do when we discuss what is being done to address air quality and the agency with that responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlon. Daryl?
Mute, yes. And I want to talk about the cooperative agreement also. And one point, and this is with all due respect, that the governor did say he was pleased with the cooperative agreement, but he was not pleased. He didn't say he was pleased with the language within it, because some of the language within it is directly opposing the reasons he gave why he was vetoing SB 34. So the perspective here is that the cooperative agreement should not include the same things he just vetoed. That's the issue, I believe. And also, as my two counterparts before me stated, that the public is still suffering. We are suffering the delays, the times, and in some instances, the inaction. I was pleased to listen to the report from the electrical providers, and it sounds great. But yet and still, every day, at least 3 of us are dying. And that's going to continue unimpeded, regardless to what could happen in the time. Thank you for the opportunity to address. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. Sylvia Bettencourt? Is Sylvia available? Why don't we move on to Al Sattler while we're trying Sylvia?
Okay. I guess, to some extent echoing Fernando Gaetan, the the cooperative agreement shows that CAAP plus measures pushed off to a later time. And for further negotiation, I suggest that rather than passing the cooperative agreement at the upcoming board meeting, that that you take time to fold those also into this. That will make it a much more all-encompassing agreement. I quite agree. Need to move forward with infrastructure, and today's presentation certainly shows that some progress being made on planning that. But I think that the other agreements are a key part also, and if the AQMD is giving up any right to do rulemaking, then I don't know where we go on those measures unless the agreement can be put in such a way that we're not excluded from negotiation on those points.
Thank you, Al. We'll try Sylvia Bettencourt again. Okay. Maybe some issues there. Fernando Duarte?
Morning, can you hear me?
Yes.
So good morning, Fernando Marquez Duarte, and I just want to echo what several of colleagues said before. I urge the board to have an alternative resolution as to not give your regulation power of the ports for 5 years. I don't think AQMD should need regulation power for not even 1 day. The second one is that the so-called public process for this MOU has been lacking. I said this in Wednesday's so-called community meeting. If there is no real public consultation with the community having decision-making power, then it's just a simulation. We need public consultation, not just, information. And again, there is no there is no emission reductions clauses. There are no mention in this MOU, and they should be mentioned if staff has said that that could come in the future, but let's put it here, because as it is, this MOU is not acceptable. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. And one last try for Sylvia.
Her line is muted. If she can unmute her line.
Okay, we have to move on. Oh, I'm sorry. I have somebody who would like to speak here in my office, so I'll turn the screen over to him.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Thomas Yelenich with the Pacific Merchant Shipping Association. In his veto message, the governor said, "This locally driven and collaborative approach toward reducing air and climate pollution is the type of consensus that should be supported and encouraged. This bill interferes with this approach, the progress made, and the ongoing good faith efforts made by the AQMD and the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach." We certainly agree with the governor in his veto message and encourage the district to move forward with this collaborative agreement. I think today's presentations also give us a strong indication of why the approach in the collaborative agreement will work well. There is a lot of work to do with infrastructure across multiple agencies, multiple utilities. The work ahead is hard. The lead times for equipment are long. And the collaboration and cooperation that will be necessary to get there is embedded into the cooperative agreement. So we strongly support this and encourage AQMD to move forward with the collaborative agreement. Thank you for your time today.
Okay. Staff, is there anything else? I think that concludes our agenda. A few of us have to run to another committee. Wayne, is there anything else that?
I'm sorry, Chair. There is nothing else on the agenda other than the next meeting date.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for the meeting, and I will see those of you who are on Stationary Source next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.